Hello, good evening and welcome to BizFirst Review 360, your weekly roundup of the top business stories and developments impacting the economy. I'm Nadim Majid. On our top story this week, President Maithripala Sirisena has broken his silence on the COPE report, which held the former governor of the central bank Arjuna Mahendran responsible for controversial bond issuances.
President Maithripala Sirisena Thursday called
Hello, good evening and welcome to BizFirst Review 360, your weekly roundup of the top business stories and developments impacting the economy. I'm Nadim Majid. On our top story this week, President Maithripala Sirisena has broken his silence on the COPE report, which held the former governor of the central bank Arjuna Mahendran responsible for controversial bond issuances.
President Maithripala Sirisena Thursday called for an independent and impartial judicial process to probe into the irregular bond auction.
මම බොහොම පැහැදිලිව කියන්නට ඕනේ මම හිටපු ආණ්ඩුවෙන් එළියට ආවේ පක්ෂය අත්හරින්නේ නැතුව
I left the government but not the party. I didn't form a government to punish one group and allow another to do wrong. That is my policy. I didn't reveal my stand on the central bank bond issue until now. My stand and my judgment is that this issue should go through an independent and impartial judicial process void of any political interference.
අධිකරණ ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයක් සඳහා මේක යොමු කරන්න ඕනේ.
President Sirisena's remarks came in the backdrop of a parliamentary panel report which held the former central bank governor responsible for the alleged bond scam. Earlier in the week, central bank governor Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy said that the governing board of the bank will meet today to discuss the findings of an on-site internal investigation report on Perpetual Treasuries PLC that made unprecedented profits from bond sales.
There are two exercises which are underway. One is the on-site examination report on perpetual treasuries undertaken by the non-bank financial institutions department of the central bank, and that report was presented to the monetary board yesterday. The monetary board had a discussion on that report. It has requested various departments of the central bank to undertake more work in specific areas to enable the monetary board to take an informed decision as to what the monetary board feels should be done in relation to the findings of the on-site report. And the board will have another meeting on Friday when we will discuss this further. And certainly the commitment I sensed amongst the board members is that they would want to go where the evidence leads them. We haven't seen the full COPE report as yet, the annexures, etc. When that comes out, I expect the monetary board would want to have a look at that and see whether there are implications for the central bank there as well.
The government appears to be making some progress on its debt-to-equity conversion plan. The government is expecting to raise $1 billion through the sale of an 80% stake in the Hambantota port.
The deal to sell an 80% stake in the loss-making Hambantota port to China may conclude within the first 5 months of 2017.
Our hope is that the Prime Minister has made his statement. If the budget comes out well, which is what we expect that it will, and then on the 17th of November, the IMF Executive Board will review our program, and we are pretty confident that will come out well. So if you take all those three things together, and the other, very positive development, though it's going to take 4 or 5 months for the money to come, is the transaction which has been agreed on the sale of the Hambantota port, where the country will get $1 billion. And this is particularly helpful because it's a non-debt creating flow. It's an FDI. It's an FDI flow. But it's different from the usual FDI flow, which, the usual FDI flow is generally associated with some outflow as well, because they invest in the country and then they have to import the capital goods, etc., to set up the plant and machinery, etc. So the net amount in the country is relatively low. But here, the money is coming in to purchase a built asset. So that is, the port is already built. So they don't have to now import capital goods to build the port. So the money just comes and sits there.
But it's a debt.
No, the debt. No.
Money will go back to.
No, it's not a debt equity swap. The debt will be. It's a government to government loan. The debt, and the government will continue to repay the debt. We will repay the debt, but that is already baked into our numbers, right? It's a proceeds of a sale, which will come into the country as into the reserves, right? So that's a big boost to the reserves, a non-debt creating boost. Then you can convert that into rupees, and my hope is that the government will use a large chunk of that to retire domestic debt. So the upshot of all this is that this should help to stabilize both the currency and the domestic interest rates.
Staying on the subject of loans, China moved on Tuesday to clarify its credit terms to developing countries amid criticism on expensive Chinese loans.
Chinese Ambassador Ye Jianling, addressing the media in Colombo, said inconsistent policies and bureaucracy is keeping Chinese investors away from Sri Lanka.
I must tell the truth, the reality. So, I strongly suggest the government agencies and officials to be more active. And also, Sri Lanka has good culture, good people, good education. The only problem is the consistency of the policy. And also openness of your heart to welcome the FDI.
The ambassador was also critical of allegations of bribery in the awarding of contracts to Chinese firms worth billions of dollars.
Even some ministers say expensive loan from China. No, this is really unfair for Chinese government, because we have the regular or fixed interest ratio for any developing countries, 2%, not only for Sri Lanka. If you have some comparison with the commercial loan at least 5%. I talked with Raway, the Minister of Finance. If you don't like this one, Raway criticized this issue many times publicly. I asked him, if you don't like this one, why you again to talk with me about another one.
Coming up next, a chat with a futurist who can predict the future of almost everything. Welcome back to the program. From anti-AIDS campaigner to corporate business strategy guru and futurist, Dr. Patrick Dixon has had a very interesting career. He was in Sri Lanka this week and I caught up with him for a chat. Good evening and welcome. Our guest this evening has a resume that is way too expansive to be described or even done justice to in a couple of seconds. Suffice to say though, he has been billed as one of Europe's leading futurists. Dr. Patrick Dixon, thank you very much for speaking to BizFirst Review 360. Let me start off straight off by asking, what is a futurist?
A futurist is simply someone who spends a lot of their time analysing trends, listening to customers, listening to business leaders, listening to those who are innovating, who are going to change tomorrow, and using those pieces of information to try and predict what tomorrow will be like. Now, futurists come and go because if you're not careful, your predictions catch up with you. Fortunately, I'm still around 30 years later.
You wrote an interesting book, Futurewise, in where you spoke about the challenges that we'll be facing, that humanity will be facing in the 21st century. And you also spoke about the technology that would be available to us. Now, the predictions on the technology front, spot on?
Yes,
you agree?
Pretty good. That's why I'm still in business. People keep inviting me back. So, now, obviously,
but in terms
you didn't get everything right.
Challenges.
You don't expect to get everything right. But here's the interesting thing for those of you watching this program: you can feel like the future is a very confusing place because of all the chaos of the news stories. But what I've learnt is this: the fundamentals that are driving our world are a few really huge trends, which are actually relatively predictable. They've been running for 30 years, and they will dominate the next 30 years. And if you study the relationship between these carefully, then you can make sense of all the noise and chaos. And of course, there are lots of events which come and take place, sudden things, which can shake our world. But the pillars of our future remain on those things. I'll give you an example. The fall of technology costs, year over year. The fall of solar cell costs, year after year. The improvement in energy efficiency, year after year. The aging of populations in places like China, Italy, Germany, and Japan, year after year. These things are fundamental, long-lasting trends. Here's another one. Improvements in life expectancy of people in Colombo, year after year.
So, Dr. Dixon, this is something that I found very curious when I was doing a little bit of research on you. How did you make the transition from physician to a pioneer in the battle against AIDS to futurist?
Well, when I was 20 years old, I had my first technology company, a company a bit like Rocker. We'll come back to Rocker in a moment, which is an amazing technology here in Sri Lanka that we have been discovering and wanting to take global. But I had my first IT company. I was an entrepreneur. Then I went back and finished off in medicine, and I was looking after people dying of cancer, then of AIDS. That led me to start an AIDS foundation, which now looks after men, women and children with HIV and prevents HIV spread in 16 nations, from Zimbabwe, Uganda, India, Thailand, Russia, Kazakhstan, UK, Ireland, many different places affected by HIV. And that came from a book. I wrote a book called The Truth About AIDS. And people responded very graciously to it. They were inspired by this vision of a better future, what they could do. And I found that programs, humanitarian programs, were starting all over the world as a result of my medical training and experience as a physician. You didn't even have to pay them. They were motivated, volunteering, and making a difference. And I thought, I should write another book. So I started to write again. I thought, if I could write a book in 6 weeks and it starts an international foundation, what happens if I write 6 more books? So after my 10th book on many issues, from politics, genetics, internet, technology, all of these things, I found that people were starting to phone me. Banks, global companies like Google, Microsoft, energy companies like BP. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm a doctor. And they say, yes, but you've written a lot of books. And come and talk to us about these extraordinary books. So that's what happened. Yes, I started. And of course, here's the interesting thing. The more you travel, the more you see of the future. The more you see of the future, the better you are at predicting. The more you predict, the more you travel. And actually, when you travel, as I have, in 58 countries, and you work with the cutting-edge innovation experts in the best companies in the world, when you are able to visit places like this and see the energy, the vitality, the entrepreneurial spirit in Colombo, then you begin to smell, taste and feel and see.
All right, so as a futurist, I'll pose this question to you. Right now in Colombo, in Sri Lanka in general, there's a period of political transition. There are worries about the economy, the stability of the economy. As a futurist, if I ask you to make a prediction about Sri Lanka, what will it be?
Well, what I would say is this. Building peace inside countries is always a challenge. Fortunately, I can hardly name a country which is at war with another nation anywhere in the world. The conflicts today tend to be internal, and they require grace, peacemakers, short memories. That we allow the past conflict to fade in order to invest in the future. And we have seen an energy, a determination to rebuild this wonderful nation. And we have seen out of the ashes of conflict has come tremendous new growth. We've seen vitality, a whole generation of entrepreneurs rising up, of new investors, big companies coming in, the universities continuing to churn out wonderful, highly educated people. This is the future of the nation. So I'm very optimistic, actually, about the country. I'm optimistic about your continued economic growth. Yes, of course we will have ups and downs, and we can always debate the inflation level, but you know what? If you look back at how this country has survived through very great difficulties, and now all that energy can be diverted into making people safe, prosperous and healthy, I think it's a wonderful future.
Dr. Dixon, can I ask you, you've been in Sri Lanka now for around about a week. What were you hoping to accomplish?
Well, the reason we were here is because of this story. We came across an extraordinary technology. It's called Rocker. It's very simple. It enables your life to rock. It connects mobile phones together just with a tap, or using even a sound. So you don't even need to be online to make a payment. It connects banks together, potentially. It enables banks to offer a service to merchants where you don't need Visa or MasterCard anymore. It means a woman selling rice on the road can be safe because she doesn't need to collect cash. It's hundreds of benefits. It will bring potentially 2 million people inside the banking system, and what's more, it costs the banks nothing because the capital is paid, they just have to sign up, and then they can start to use it, and then they just pay some of the revenue. Now, this thing is very, very exciting. What we're hoping to accomplish, nothing less than the global launch of this amazing technology. The rocket technology we launched on Friday. We had 120 people there. Earlier in the day, I was at the Chamber of Commerce talking to another 120 about the future of this wonderful nation. And that's what we were here. That's what we've achieved. We've had loads of meetings with banks, with boards of banks, directors of banks, people who are customers of banks, and we believe that Sri Lanka is on the edge of spearheading a global revolution in payments. This is a Sri Lanka success story. We want it to be a global success story. Rocker. That's what it is about.
So, Dr. Dixon, I would love to have you for longer to pick your brain on multiple issues, but unfortunately time is short. There's something that we've been talking a lot about in Sri Lanka and actually around the globe as well. A lot of the discussion around economic growth, energy, overpopulation even tends to revolve around sustainability. Now, you also wrote a book called Sustainagility, a very interesting read. As a futurist, in your predictions, how much of a factor is sustainability?
Sustainability is the #1 survival issue for the future of humankind. And the generation today are right to ask if there will be a third millennium, or a full third millennium, or a fourth millennium, and what will life be like? Here is some really good news for Sri Lanka, and I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing solar cells and wind and all kinds of things happening. You know, the cost of green tech is falling rapidly. It's a big trend. It's one of those big trends I talked about. And, you know, even if there isn't any more green tech innovation, just rolling out what we have the power to change the future of our world. And I'll tell you this, In Germany recently, there was a day when it was so windy and so sunny. The solar cells were working so hard, the wind turbines were spinning so fast, that was a national emergency. There was so much free power, they didn't know what to do. So the utility companies were phoning up factories and they were saying, please turn on all your air conditioning and all your heating at the same time. I said, what? No. Please, we will pay you. What? Yes, we will pay you to use all the power you can take from us for the next 3 days. So what they had was a reversal of the normal market forces. Normally, energy costs, you pay a company to supply. Here, the customer is being asked for money, for payment to take the electricity. This happened again in Queensland, Australia, I think 18 months ago. So green tech is on the edge of doing extraordinary things, and we have hardly started. So watch this space. I hope and pray we are in time to prevent a climatic catastrophe. But one thing is for sure, the tools are here. The economic reasons for using them become stronger every day because of the costs of the technology falling. So as we roll these things out across this wonderful and beautiful nation and across the world, I am optimistic, cautiously optimistic, that we will be able to build that great future.
Dr. Dixon, unfortunately, our time's up, but I hope you will be visiting Sri Lanka again soon.
Will indeed.
And we'll be able to have more time to talk about the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to BizFirst Review 360. Tonight on Speak Your Mind, we're featuring the speech that was delivered by Central Bank Governor Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy at the 28th anniversary convention of the Association of Professional Bankers.
The fiscal outcomes, the budget deficit has been the main source of instability in the system for decades, since 1978 really. If one were to caricaturize the Sri Lankan economy, one would say it was a high budget deficit, high inflation, high nominal interest rate, overvalued currency economy. That's essentially what we have been for much of the last 30-40 years. And that is diametrically the opposite of what characterized the successful economies of Asia, which ran sound budgets, had low inflation, had low nominal interest rate, and an undervalued, if anything, and stable currency. So we did exactly the opposite. So it's not surprising that we started off by being second to Japan at the time of independence on just about any indicator in Asia. We were ahead of Korea as late as 1965 and just behind Singapore. And now you see where we are, and you can see that clearly that the fact that we did things 180 degrees differently from those countries has not been helpful. But now we've graduated to low middle income country status. We are exposed to rating agencies and international capital markets who impose very severe discipline. If you deviate from sound macroeconomic management, that you pay a price. And that is something we need to absorb now. We are in a new paradigm. The parameters within which we are working are different. But from an economic perspective, arguably the most important insight that we need to absorb is the fact that we can no longer drive growth through incremental labor. That labor augmentation is not going to drive growth in Sri Lanka, which means there's a much higher premium on increasing competitiveness and productivity. It has to be innovation and this increase in competitiveness and productivity that is going to drive growth. Right now in Sri Lanka, we don't have a growth model. The post-conflict period from 2010 to 2015, growth was really driven by foreign commercial borrowing financed public investment in infrastructure. That's what was the main source of growth in the economy. And sectors like construction and transport, non-tradable sectors, were able to thrive around that public investment program, which was financed by foreign commercial borrowing. As I said, we've now maxed out on our credit card. That model is no longer viable. So what should be the new growth model? Clearly, because there's a lack of fiscal space and because of the debt dynamics, it will have to be largely private investment, private sector driven, domestic and foreign investment driven growth. If you have a domestic market of just 20 million people, clearly you can't sustain 7-8% growth, which is the objective the authorities have set, to create 1 million jobs through selling into a market of 21 million people. Now, of course, over the last 10-12 years, the tradable sector has declined from about 65%, 68% of GDP down to about 45%. Now, that absolutely does not make sense for a small economy. But one of the reasons that has happened is because the World Bank's systematic country diagnostic, the latest one, found that the economy today is as closed as it was in 1970, and largely due to para-tariffs. And these para-tariffs were often driven because of the cash flow problems in the budget. Whenever the authorities were short of money for the budget, they landed a para-tariff here or a cess, all kinds of stuff, which has meant that this economy has become extremely protected, and which clearly is not efficiency oriented. The other pillar clearly is FDI. Because if you look around the world, and you look at the successful countries, many of which are in Asia, the successful countries in the last 20, 30 years, they've all really had export-led growth, which has been driven to a significant extent by FDI. FDI, whether it's China, whether it's Singapore, whether you're large, you're small, whether you're a statist economy or you're a more market-oriented economy, all of them have relied on foreign direct investment to, in their cases, they have very high rates of saving. But in our cases, we have to fill the savings investment gap. On top of that, we need the technology, the market access, the know-how, etc. But in my view, actually, there are two factors which I think mitigate the negative effects of what is, in fact, a sluggish world economy. And those two factors are Sri Lanka's location. Sri Lanka is in the middle of China's maritime Silk Route. Sri Lanka is 20 miles away from what is now the fastest growing large economy in the world. And Sri Lanka has excellent relations with a series of capital surplus countries in Asia, with China, with Japan, with Korea, Singapore, other Southeast Asian countries. And in these countries, it's interesting in that if you have very good government-to-government relations, then you have reasonable prospects of those governments influencing their companies to come and invest in a country with whom they have good relations.
And that's a wrap of our show. Don't forget to look us up on Facebook. BizFirst Review 360 is where you'll find us. I'll see you again, same time, same place, next Friday.